people talk about the waiting period, they talk about it like it's so simple. You have to wait on God and all of that. But waiting is hard. Waiting is really hard. I remember a time when I was waiting for something. I was seriously waiting on God for something. I was praying. I was fasting. I was sowing seed, doing evangelism. I was always in church. Morning service, evening service, I'm going to work, I stop in church. I'm coming from work, I stop in church. Like, I was literally always in church, always doing the work of God. If we had double service that day, first service I was ushering, second service I was in medical team. I was just serving, recklessly, ruthlessly serving. And putting everything. Every time they say make a petition, it was this one thing I was looking for. So I was doing everything. I was doing everything. Days turned to weeks, weeks turned to months, month turned to year, year turned to years. And the funny thing is, this thing was something I saw my mate getting easily. And I was like, God, what's happening? What's happening? Why am I not getting this? But one thing I've come to realize looking back at those years, because I remember that I had to wait on God for over 2 years, 2.5 years before I got that miracle. Looking at it now, it looks like yesterday. Like, I'm just like, that was yesterday. It doesn't look so lengthy as it was during the time I was waiting for it. During the time I was in the period of waiting, it looked like 1,000,000 years. It looked as if this thing would never come. That's the thing about waiting. But as I look back at it, I'm grateful because I'm able to see and connect the dots about what that period did for me. That was the period I was praying. That was the period I was praying for practically almost everything that I'm experiencing in my life now. That was the period where when I go to church, I hear prayer points for 2 years time, for 10 years time. And because I was always in service, somehow I was just preparing myself. Most of the things I could do that period, or that period made me find myself doing, are things I'm effortlessly doing now. And I'm really grateful for that period. You need grace to effectively wait for God, to effectively wait on God. Because if you are not careful, a waiting period can become a wasteful period. You can get bored, you can get tired, you could even get frustrated and decide not to do anything. A wasting period is a period where a person is just waiting without working on themselves. The person is just waiting without grooming. He's waiting, but he's not working on himself. He's not grooming. If you're just waiting, thinking that a time will come where it will be better, without you working and developing yourself, it will only be a wasting period. It wouldn't be a waiting period. A waiting period is a period where you begin to cultivate yourself. You begin to improve on yourself. That's the time to go more deeper with God. That's the time to fellowship with God. That's the time to be much more inclined in whatever you want to do, your career, business, your relationship with God, your communication. That's the time to groom. But if you want to just wait without working on yourself and expecting that the miracle would come meet you soonest, it will only be a wasting period. Even when the miracle comes to you, you will be an underdeveloped person for that miracle. There are some miracles that are waiting to come to us, but they've not come to us because we have not prepared ourselves to be the vessel that would carry that miracle. A waiting period is a period where you are being tested and trained to become the material, the vessel, capable to carry that miracle. That's the period when you find yourself praying more. You find yourself aligning with God. You find yourself building yourself in communication, in career, even in whatever it is that your purpose is. You're building yourself with God. That's the period you are praying more. That's the period you're speaking into your next 5 years or 10 years. That's your waiting period. It's the period you are doing work. For example, you're waiting on a job and the job finally comes. You find out that you would have limited time to do certain things. But now is the time you need to pray for that job. Now is the time you need to, pursue other things. Pursue your career. Get yourself open into what God could actually blossom you to become. Because if that job comes, it may not give you the appropriate time that you need to pursue certain things. The Bible shows us different instances of people who waited. You have stories of Noah and Abraham and Joseph. I like the story of Joseph. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers and sold. I can believe that when he landed in Potiphar's house, he was already feeling like, I'm just okay here. Let me just stay here. Like, this is just good enough. Because he was made the head servant of Potiphar's house. He was doing okay. Very okay for the wife of Potiphar to be looking at him. He was doing okay. That's how a lot of believers do. When we get into certain positions, we are like, I'm just good here. I'm just fine here. This place is okay for me. And God is saying, this is not where I want you. You still have a lot of waiting to do. He still has to wait in the prison. He still has to, interpret dreams for his colleagues in prison, and they would abandon him. There's still a long process in your waiting. I'm still taking you somewhere. The waiting period is actually taking you somewhere. And Joseph was like, I'm okay here. A lot of believers, when we get to, Potiphar's house, because of the betrayal of where we are coming from, we tell ourselves that we are okay here. We are fine here. We're just good here. This is just fine. This is just okay enough. Like, I'm okay here. And that's not where God is taking us to. God has bigger plans for us. The waiting process is still leading us somewhere. But because of maybe the betrayals we had, the disappointment we had, and we find something that is nearly as good, we tell ourselves that we are done with the waiting process, that we are just good here. And God is saying, no, I didn't bring you all the way here to just drop you in Potiphar's house. I still have a palace for you. And then we'll end up sticking with Potiphar's house, thereby missing the palace. One major reason why waiting is hard is because of the fear of the unknown. You do not have an idea of when will the waiting stop.